Well, welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Gina Feta, and I am going to be co-leading some of the content we're going through today. If you've attended any of these trainings in the past, then you're familiar with how we go through this process. If not, I will explain that to you here shortly. But before we get started, I just want to welcome you to the enforcement training today. This is going to be a little bit of a recap on not only what went out in the newsletter to all of the facilities recently, just kind of giving you an opportunity to ask questions about some of the recent legislation updates and also some of the new functionality that's coming. So who you have here today with you is myself, and Megan and Dan are part of the team that will be supporting the training and questions around the system functionality. And then Megan Whitby, of course, her and her team are there in the room. You can see them. Tom will not be joining us today, but we are all here to support you, present the information, give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have so you feel prepared and ready to go for next week. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and pass it over to you, Megan, for any words that you might want to say before we get started.
Thank you, Gina, and thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate your continued participation and support as we continue to develop the marijuana licensing management system and add more and more functionality into it. What the functionality you're going to see today, hopefully you guys won't be using on a daily basis because it is our enforcement functionality. But in those cases where you do find yourself or your facility in enforcement situations, this should make the process easier for everyone so that you can track where you are. You'll be able to request hearings and ISCs and things electronically through the system and not have to wonder whether or not we received those notices from you. So it's good functionality, hopefully not something you'll be using on a regular basis. But I also want to thank Gina and her team for including some other really great updates into this presentation about the legislation and other things that have kind of shifted our world a little bit, as we're all kind of used to that now. But thank you all for participating. We truly appreciate your continued support and cooperation as we keep moving forward together in the marijuana program.
Great, thank you, Megan. So as Megan mentioned, this isn't something that we're anticipating or hopefully that you have to use a lot, but with everything that we're covering today, we just want to make sure you have all the information you need at your disposal. So here is what to expect. We just heard from Megan, so thank you for that. We are going to go through some program updates, so that will include some of the highlights from the legislation updates, not all of them, but most of the ones that you probably are most significant or care about the most. We are going to talk about some additional system enhancements outside of what's coming with enforcements. And then we will talk specifically about that new functionality that's been added with enforcements, the features and benefits of it. And then Megan on our team is going to go through some demos so that way you can see it in action and have the opportunity to ask any questions. We'll follow up with next steps, anything that you might need to know to prepare for next week when this functionality launches. And then, of course, Q&A is at the end, but feel free to ask questions throughout. You can put your questions in the chat. We'll pause intermittently. So if you want to take yourself off mute and ask the question with your voice, by all means, please feel free to do that as well. And we're going to get going. Okay, so we're going to get started right off the bat with some legislation updates. These are the four that we're going to talk about, mostly three. The facility agent card being used as a dispensary agent card now. So this is something that the section here is referenced. The person may act in the capacity of a nonprofit medical marijuana dispensary agent. So now those cards, if you have a facility agent card, you can also use it as a dispensary agent card. And if you want to see more information that's in the update or in the bill, then it's listed there of where you can reference that section. The level 1 fingerprint card is now accepted as well. So any individuals that are applying for the cards listed you see here on the screen, a copy of the level 1 fingerprint clearance card may be submitted with applications. So I think that's a really great update. And then there's a lot of testing changes. They're listed throughout the bill as well. But you can go into the bill and you'll find the areas that those updates are made. I believe everything is highlighted in blue for those significant changes and updates. But we did call out a few of them in the newsletter if you happen to see that as well. And then just a note on rulemaking, that the rulemaking will be conducted to ensure that all the rules are consistent with the amended statute. So just as everything is done in the past with rulemaking, there is a process, and that is going to happen here as well. So just know that that's something that is in the works, and you'll hear more about it as the rulemaking happens. Anything that you'd like to add, Megan, or anything I didn't fully cover?
I think you did great, Gina. Just to remind everyone that House or Senate Bill 2605 did go into effect immediately because it had an emergency clause. So even though we haven't completed those rulemakings to catch up with the new statutes, those changes are in effect. And since statute always trumps rule, those changes are in effect even if they conflict a little bit with the current rules. Just to also clarify that the level 1 fingerprint clearance card, we've been accepting that for the facility agent applications, but DPS was unable to accept a reason for applying for a level 1 fingerprint clearance card being having a facility agent application. Now they are able to accept level 1 fingerprint clearance card applications for the purpose of obtaining a facility agent card, a dispensary agent card, lab agent, or caregiver card. So that cleans that up. And of course, there's benefits to that level 1 fingerprint clearance card as opposed to sending rolled prints. One is that the card is good for 6 years. Another is there's a lower fee for the facility agent cards. And also, if your new employees have the level 1 fingerprint clearance card, they've already had that background check completed. So you're not waiting until after the fact of when we issue that facility agent card. And then if they are to have other law enforcement issues, then we're notified by law enforcement since they already have an existing card. But just a few things to keep in mind for everybody.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Very good context and clarity around those things. We did get another question in the chat from Crystal. So she asked, who still needs DA cards, POBMs, cultivation techs, or will FA cards suffice?
So the Senate Bill 2605 changed the statutory language to say that someone that has a facility agent card may act as a dispensary agent. So if someone has a facility agent card, they can do anything that someone with a dispensary agent card can do. You just need to make sure that they are linked to whatever facilities they are working for in our marijuana licensing management system. So it's that link that really connects them to the facility and allows them to work for that facility. But yes, dispensary agent cards are no longer required as long as they have a facility agent card linked to the facility.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Are there any other questions that you might have on the legislation updates? Okay, then I am going to keep moving. Program and system enhancements. We're really excited to share these things with you today because we know some of them are things that you've been asking for. These are enhancements as time goes on. You know, we put functionality into place for you that is the most important so that you can do the things that you need to do. But we're always listening to feedback. We're always looking to add in little features here and there that make your lives a little bit easier. So here are a few of those. Photo cropping for a card photo. This is something that I know has been asked for both internally and externally among folks. That photo cropping feature is going to be really helpful when you're uploading photos to an application. You can now do that and make sure that it fits the right size and everything that's needed. So that's really great. Calendar due dates. This caused a little bit of confusion sometimes when there's some back and forth of that there used to be that countdown only where you might say 10 days to go or 30 days or whatever that countdown is in those action required notifications that pop up in your portal. Well, now you're also going to see those due dates. So that will eliminate any confusion around when something is actually due when you see the due date there in that notification. The DBA, I know this was a big one for you guys, for any of the facilities that are not operating under their legal name. The DBA now being displayed, I know is really helpful, especially when you're doing a search or FAs are trying to link to a facility or facilities are trying to link to an FA, that the DBA will now be displayed within the portal. Fee waivers for facility agent applications. So the FA application is updated with an option to opt out. And then renewals. So we are up at that time frame now where there are some facilities that are up for renewal. So this must be submitted through the facility licensing portal at least 30 days prior to the expiration date. So if you are one of those facilities, you will know that by looking in your portal. You might know that otherwise as well, but knowing that it must be submitted 30 days prior to the expiration date. Annual financial statements and audits must also be uploaded unless you're a dual licensee and have opted to operate as a for-profit. So I'm going to pause there and allow Megan to jump in with any other context she might want to share. And if you guys have any questions on any of these updates, please ask them in the chat or unmute yourself.
I think you covered it, Gina, just reminding those 31 dispensaries that are up for renewal in order to be fully compliant, make sure you submit that application 30 days ahead of time before your expiration date. And if you have not selected to go for profit, you do have to submit those annual financials and audits unless you haven't been operating in the past 2 years.
Cool. Any questions on these updates? Hopefully you guys are happy about these, and we still welcome your feedback as you start to use this functionality and see it in action, and let us know how it's working for you. Next, we are going to talk a little bit about enforcements. This is the big release that's coming up next week. So talk about what some of the benefits are for you. As with everything else we've released in the portal, it creates more transparency and visibility into the process. So like Megan mentioned at the beginning, a lot of that stuff, you'll be able to log into your portal and be able to see exactly the status of where things stand, what's happening, the notifications or emails that you would traditionally get, they're going to happen as well, but you'll be able to see records of those. There is also a view statements and payments tab that is brand new to your portal. So on the left-hand side, when you log into your portal, you have all those tabs that are there for you. There's 2 new tabs that are going to be added with this release. One of them is called Statements and Payments. The other one is the enforcement tab that Megan's going to cover in the demo today. So you'll see both of those tabs in action and be able to see how they work for you. But in that Statements and Payments tab, you're going to be able to access all the information that's related to your account. We're going to start with enforcements and then add on functionality from there. Less paper and email correspondence, again, because you're doing that interaction in the portal where the information is being relayed through there. You can also easily request a hearing or ISC if needed. So should you have an enforcement that you are dealing with, then you can easily request a hearing or ISC through the portal. It makes it a little bit more seamless, more efficient, and you'll be able to see the status of those actions as well. And then easy access to historical data and records. As with everything else that we've released in the portal, there is you have the ability to go in and look at the historical data. This will be historical moving forward as we go into this release. With that, I am going to turn it over to you, Megan, to walk us through a demo.
All right, and did anyone have any questions for Gina and team before we get started with more of the demo? I don't see anything in the chat. If anyone has anything, they can come off mute too, like Gina mentioned. All right. So before I fully get started and walk through the demo, we will be going over a little bit of what we're going to look at today. So I'm going to start with processing and enforcement with a civil penalty associated with that. So that will be a monetary fine. We'll be able to see how that links to the statements and payments, how you'll be able to pay an invoice from there, and how all of that's related with the enforcements and the new statements and payment information. We'll also be looking at an enforcement that is not a civil penalty. So it's not a monetary fine. You'll be looking at how that differs from the civil penalty fine, where you can see in the portal the differences between the two actions that would be required for those types of enforcements. Now, as Gina mentioned, this isn't something that we always hope that you guys are looking at. You won't necessarily be using enforcements that often, hopefully, but we do want to make you aware of this information, and it will also be in the POBM handbook, the lab agent handbook, lab owner handbook, and the agent handbook. All of those types of things and the associated information that's relevant for those different roles. So you will be able to find that, and Gina will go through more detail on that as we finish our session out today. So with that, I will take over here and share my screen. All right, we should be able to see the facility licensing portal here. Now, we're all very familiar with this screen. We're all very familiar with this portal, I'm sure. We do a lot of things in here these days. It's where we go to work through applications, look at cards, anything like that. So with that, I will log in to begin looking at one of the enforcements that we have associated with this account. So here I'm clicking on the dispensary tile, just as I'm sure you all are aware, to access the facility that I would like to look at. And here I'm going to click on Joyride. That's the facility associated with this enforcement that I received notice for. Now, before I dig into the new tabs here, the enforcement tab on the left and the statements and payments tab all the way on the very bottom left, I will talk about some notifications and emails that you will be receiving. So throughout this new process, you'll be receiving, sorry, it's not a new process, it is a new digital process that you'll be receiving all of the notifications and emails associated with this. So throughout the enforcement process, you'll see payment due soon or payment past due. So those will be two different notifications you'll see that appear here. If your payment will be due soon, you'll get a notification that will occur 7 days prior to that. And then if your payment is past due, it will show 1 day after the past due date. The notification will appear here as well. You'll also be receiving emails and written snail mail that you'll be able to see before this enforcement appears in the portal. So you won't just be notified by something in the portal that you have an enforcement. You will be getting that. You will be given that correspondence appropriately. You'll be able to see that and then come view it in here and act accordingly on it. So with that, I am going to dig into the enforcements tab a little bit more. I will click on this here, and I am brought to the enforcements page. So I'll give a little bit about a little bit of an overview about the enforcements page before I go into detail on the actual enforcement. We can see here in the top right that it shows the facility that's associated with this enforcement. This is something that we can see on every page. Just make sure that we are oriented to what facility we should be in and that we're looking at the right one and the appropriate one for what we're working with. From here, if we move into the enforcement number, we can see the enforcement link that's associated with this. It's the number and it has a link to the enforcement detail page. I'll come back to that in a minute once we get through the rest of the page. We can then see the description here. This will show the description that ADHS has uploaded for this particular enforcement. Then we can see the status here. We can see one listed as in process, one listed as complete. There will be numerous different statuses that can be listed here depending on what the status of the enforcement is. And it will start in this in process state. That's the first one that you'll see in the portal here. When it moves to the in process status, that's when it'll appear and you'll be able to start processing it from your end. We can also see this action letter sent date. This was the date the physical action letter was sent to you. Like I said, you'll receive it via the snail mail, and this is where that will appear for that date. We also see this hearing request deadline. It shows the date the hearing must be requested by, if necessary. Then we can see the hearing date and time field, as well as the ISC, or Informal Settlement Conference, date and time field. Now, these will be populated if the hearing or ISC has been requested and scheduled. Those two fields will be filled in there. We can then see up in this top right as well, the records found. It shows 2 records listed here. It just will show the count for the records on the page. Now, if I dig into this a little bit more, we can see back on this enforcement number, we can click on the link where it will bring me to the enforcement detail page. So this is where the enforcement will be detailed out a little bit more. This top section will have a lot of the same information from the previous page. So it will have the enforcement number, also was listed on the previous page, the description, status, date notified, as well as this hearing request deadline. We can also see the hearing date and time that was listed on the previous page. What we do see here that's new is this hearing case number. So if the hearing is scheduled, it will be listed here with the case number as well as the date and time, like I mentioned before. The ISC date and time, that was also from the previous page that we saw, carried over here. Now, something new on this enforcement detail page as well is this related files area. So this will show any files that are related to the enforcement detail if applicable. If you do have files that are associated, you can click the link here. It will open that file as a PDF. You can save it, download it, whatever needs to happen with that. But you will be able to see all of those related files in one area, all linked right here. We can now go down a little bit further and we can see this enforcement resulted from. So this is the associated application, inspection, whatever that might be, that this enforcement was a result of. So we can click on this, and I will do this. It will redirect us to whatever this was. So from here, we can see it was a facility information update application. This is the enforcement as a result of this application. So we could scroll down here, see what it was, see what happened. I will return back now and navigate to the same screen that we were just on. Clicking through here, getting back into the enforcement link. And we can see here, this is what I just clicked on. This enforcement resulted from, and it brought us to that link of the application that this was associated with. Now, up in the top right here, we can see this hearing request button. This will be available as the hearing request until this hearing request deadline date. If this date has passed, the hearing request button will no longer be available. It also will change between hearing request or ISC request, depending on the hearing or ISC status, if it's been requested or not. I will get back to that in 1 minute after we talk about the actions. So down here, we can see actions associated with this enforcement detail. So here we have the name in the first column. This is the name associated with this action. You can click on this link. I'll do that in 1 minute as well, as soon as I'm done explaining the rest of these columns. After the name column, we can move to the status column where we're able to see the status of this associated action. We then move to the total amount. Now, like I said originally, this is a civil penalty case, so it's a monetary case, which means that it has a fine associated with it here, and we're able to see the total amount listed for that action. We can then see the start date due or the end date. So we can see all of those dates. The start date would be listed here, and the due or end date would be listed here in this column. We can then see the completed date. So if this action has been completed, the date will be listed here. So like I said, I'm going to come back up to this request hearing now, and we can see what happens if we would like to request a hearing. So in order to do so, I can click this request hearing button, and I will get this request hearing pop-out box that appears. So it's asking me here if I am sure that I would like to request the hearing, and it's also giving me the option to check the associated box right here if I would like to also request an informal settlement conference. Now, for the purposes of this demo right now, I'm not going to group these together and request a hearing and an ISC together. I will do them separately, but we can see what it looks like when I just request the hearing. So I am not checking this box right now, and I would like to submit that, yes, I would like to request the hearing. To do so, I can click submit here. And it gives me the message of success. Thank you. The request for hearing has been submitted. So we can see here that I successfully submitted that hearing request. And if we look now in the top right, that button has changed from request hearing to now request ISC. If I were to have grouped the two together and requested the hearing and the ISC at the same time, no button would appear here because we've requested both options that we are able to already. If I would like to request the ISC, say this has been some time and I decided the ISC was also necessary or appropriate, I can do that. You can do that before the hearing deadline as well, where I'm able to then click the Request ISC button. We can see here the pop-out appears that says Request Informal Settlement Conference. Now it doesn't give me any checkbox here like the previous one did, as I've already requested that hearing. This is just requesting the second option, which would be the ISC in this case. So it asked me the final question, are you sure you'd like to request this informal settlement conference? Once again, I can click submit. If I did want to cancel, I could cancel. It would just bring me back to the enforcement detail page here, or I could exit out of this and just return to the page. I would like to submit. So I click submit. We can see the same message once again, success, your request has been submitted for the ISC. And now we can see that this button in the top right has been removed. There's no more request hearing or request ISC that can occur, as we've already requested both options. Now, one more thing on this page is the action link right here. If I click on this action response on this name here, I'm able to go into the action detail page. So I can now see a little bit more information associated with this action detail. Once again, just like the previous page, we can see the name, the status, the end or due date, as well as the completed date. Those will all be filled in and associated with this action detail here. We can also see the related files associated with this. Once again, just a list here that will display accordingly, where you can click the links, open them, download them, save them, whatever it may be. We then can move down into the middle of the page here and we can see more detail associated with this action. So for this, it shows similar information to the Statements and Payments tab. So I won't actually go through and click Pay here. There are multiple ways to get to your invoice, to pay your invoice, anything like that. So I am just showing you kind of the different ways you're able to see different areas and what you're able to do if you'd like to pay it from here, or you can also navigate to the Statements and Payments section. So like I said, I won't be paying this right here, but we can still walk through and see a little bit more information about it. So we can see here the next payment date associated with this action. We can see the total amount of the action that is due, and then we can see the total remaining. So we can see here that $1,000 has already been paid from this specific action. Like I said, I'm not going to be paying this here, but if I would like to, I could click pay and it would direct me to the area where I'm able to then pay this invoice accordingly. Now, if I click back here, this will take me back to the previous pages. It's one way to easily navigate between the action detail page, the enforcement detail page, as we see here, and the enforcements page. Now, before I move into processing the actual payment, do we have any questions on the enforcement page or enforcement detail page overviews?
There are currently no questions in the chat, but if you guys have any, please feel free to put some in there or take yourself off mute and you can ask a question that way as well. All right.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, we will move on to statements and payments now. So this is the final tab that we can see here in this portal. And as Gina mentioned, we're starting right now with enforcements, but we will be building on that and you'll be able to see other payment information, other previous payments that have been made in the future. There will be additional functionality that's built for that. So to check out more information on this statements and payments, I will click this tab. And I'm brought to the Statements and Payments screen. Now here we can see this little disclaimer at the top that says to make a payment, select a payment amount and click the Submit Payment button. If multiple invoices are listed, a payment amount per invoice can be selected. This is telling you a little bit of instructions about what can be done on this page and how multiple invoices are able to be paid at one time and can be multi-selected. So an overview of this page, before we continue, we can see here once again, the facility name listed at the top right, just to make sure that we're working within the appropriate facility. We can then see this total selected payment section at the top. Right now it's listed at 0, and the submit payment button is a kind of grayed out. This is because no payments have been selected, so we aren't able to submit anything yet. This is an active field that will be updated as we go and click certain buttons or write in specific text. So if we were to go down here to this section here and I were to click certain buttons, I could click this first button. We can see this total selected payment has been updated to the amount accordingly listed here. And then we can see that the submit payment button has now been moved to the red color instead of the grayed out, and it is able to be selected. We can also see here, if I were to move down and select the second radio button that has the balance, we see that the payment has moved to that amount, also able to submit that if I would like. We can also see one additional feature here, and it's the other radio button. We can select that other amount, and then we can enter an amount in here that we would like, where it would be a free form text, and you're able to select or write in the number. You can click out of that, and it will update to whatever amount has been listed in here. So we can see I put 50, 50 can be there. I could put 20, and it would update accordingly with the amount in the other amount section, as well as the total selected payment. Now, if we did have multiple invoices listed here, we'd be able to select multiple radio buttons, something from each one if we'd like, and it would update this total selected payment to reflect all of those radio buttons that were checked. You'd then be able to process all of those and submit payment for all of those at one time if necessary. So from here, I will leave it at this 500 selected, and we can go through a little bit more about this page from the middle section. So we can see here, we start in this first column with the invoice number. Now this invoice number is also a link like the enforcement detail or the action detail links that we previously saw. We are able to click on this and move into the invoice detail page to give us a little bit more information. I will hold off on that though until I continue through the rest of this page. We then see here, this second item is a graphic that shows when this payment is due. So we see here that it's a light gray color, shows that it's due in 83 days. There will be different types of graphics here that will be listed. You could have one that would be a darker gray if it's further out for the date. You could have one that would be green and say paid if this invoice was already paid or this associated payment. And then you could also have one if the action was past due. If this payment was past due, you would have it turn red and it would show you that it was past due. We will be able to see the green one in a minute when I dig into the invoice detail page a little bit more. We can then move into the description, where we can see the description for the enforcement invoice will be listed here from ADHS in this section. We can also see the related to information. So this invoice is related to enforcement with this following number. It's also linked here. If I were to select this, it would bring me to the associated enforcement that it is linked with. We can also see, as I mentioned, the select payment amount, where we're able to select multiple radio button or any radio button that we'd like from this list. One can be selected at any given time. And it will tell you the amounts that are due by or the remaining balance or other. We can see in this next column the status. Right here, this shows as a partial payment, as we have paid some previous money towards this. And it's currently being paid with the rest of the following information. The total here listed for the total amount of the invoice. And then the balance. Like I said, we've paid $1,000 out of the $2,000 so far. The balance remaining is also $1,000, which means it's been a partial payment so far. We can also see this invoice date listed here. So this was the date that the invoice was sent. And then we can finally see the due date. So the date that this invoice is due. Now, before submitting payment, like I said, there are a couple ways and a couple places to submit the payment. The first place we saw was on the Enforcements tab, where we were able to click that pay button and it would direct us here. We also see here, if I wanted to pay right from here, I could do that and I could click submit payment, but we're gonna hold off for one more minute while we move into this enforcement number link and view the invoice number link and view the invoice detail, and then we can submit the payment from there. So I will click on this invoice number link where I am brought into the invoice detail page now. Now this detail page just shows us a little more detail, like I said, with the enforcement detail, with the action detail, and now we have the invoice detail here that we're looking at. It shows a lot of the same information that was on that previous screen, the invoice number, the status, the total, the balance, as well as the due date. Also shows the description here, a little bit easier to see sometimes. And then we can see once again, this related to enforcement payment plan with the number. This will be linked as it was before. You can see the link associated with the enforcement here. Moving to the right side, we can also see the selected payment amount. Once again, there are radio buttons that can be selected. We're going to hold off for one more minute until we submit the payment here, until we go over the payment schedules section. So we can see here, if I scroll down a little bit more, we have the payment schedules listed here at the bottom. In this first column here, we see the due date. As I mentioned, all the dates are listed. If you have paid a certain invoice or partially paid, it will list those payments and it will send them to the bottom with the payments that are upcoming listed at the top. So we can see here, I was mentioning that this graphic can turn from a light gray to a dark gray or green, as it is here with paid, or it could be red. Then if we move to this third column here, we can see status. These two payments are listed as not paid. These two payments are listed as paid, and it shows the payment date associated with this payment as well. We can then move to this next column where we see amount due. So this shows the amount that is due for each of these payments. And then for the two that have already been paid, it will show how much was actually paid towards this as well. The final column here we see is the amount remaining column. We can see that the amount remaining for the two payments at the top that have not been paid is listed. And then we can see what is remaining, which is 0 here, listed for the payments that have been paid. We see the back button that's associated with each of these pages. You're able to click back, return to the invoice page if necessary. Finally, time to submit the payment. So we see here the selected payment at the top now. I have selected this $500 with the amount due as the payment here. If I wanted to click through, once again, just like the previous pages, I could do that and enter any information that I would like in the other. I will select the first radio button here. It updates the selected payment amount accordingly. And I am going to click Submit Payment to submit my payment. We can see that the payment amount selected pop-up box appears, and we can see the invoice number and the amount are two columns that are associated with this. Now, if there were multiple invoices that you would like to be paying here, like I said, they would all appear on separate lines, and you'd be able to see the invoice number associated with each one and the amount that you'll be paying towards each invoice. Now, we only have the one invoice listed here, so we're just paying this one, this invoice number with this selected amount. If you did have multiple, the total amount here would be updated accordingly depending on the number of line items with the amounts associated with each line item. If I didn't want to actually make this payment, I selected the submit payment by mistake, say, you can click cancel, it will return you back to the previous screen. If I would like to continue forward with this, I can click next. And I'm brought to the checkout screen here. I will just fill in specific details associated with this account, and then I will fill in credit card information and click continue to move forward. We can review the order. Now we can see here, this is the payment amount that I have selected, the total amount associated with the payment that I'm making. Confirming that, I can click authorize. My request will be processed. And I will return to the checkout screen with the receipt, where I can then return to the portal and receive the payment confirmation screen. Now, if we'd like to check and see that this now is paid, I can return back to the portal, navigate back into my associated dispensary, Joyride here, all the way down into statements and payments. We can see this invoice. We can see here now the balance has been updated. It's only 500 now. We saw before it was 1,000, and the total is there, partial payment. I can click on the invoice detail number, where I can now see I have 3 associated payments that have been paid for this payment schedule. This was the one that was just made. We can see the payment date as 8/10 and today's date as 8/10. So it's real time, updates accordingly, and you'll be able to see all of your information from one spot right here. Any questions on the invoices, the statements and payments, anything that we have dealing with payments or enforcement so far?
There aren't any questions in the chat right now, Megan.
All right. Quiet morning. All right, I will continue then, and we can talk about an enforcement that is not a civil penalty here. It will look very similar, but we'll just be able to see a little bit of the differences for those two related items. In order to do that, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the portal. Now, I am going to be referencing a different dispensary this time. We'll pretend I'm still Henry Jones, but I will be clicking in here. And I will be going to King Green instead of this Joyride now, King Green Dispensary. So I once again received information that I have an enforcement against me. I would like to check out this enforcement and see all of the information about it. Like I said, notifications will appear in different ways. And we can see here, if I navigate to the enforcement tab, that I do have an enforcement that is associated with my facility. If I click on this enforcement number, we're able to see here that this enforcement detail page appears. Looks the same as the one we've previously mentioned. We have all the same buttons at the top and all the same information. We can also see what it's related to. Like I said, I could click on that to view that information. Now, one key difference here is that we don't see a total amount associated with this enforcement. Now, this is not anything that deals with a fine here, so we won't see a payment amount listed. We won't have a fine that needs to be paid for this specific enforcement, just action that needs to be taken. So if I click here on this action, I'm brought into the action detail page. Now, we saw before that there was a payment plan or a payment schedule listed on the action detail page. This has nothing like that because there's no payment associated with it. So you won't be able to see any action for a payment associated with this action. There would be items if the state would like you to upload certain files or send in certain information in writing. There could be certain checkboxes or things that appear here that you have to fill in accordingly with the action detail page. Now, if I click back, I can also go into this statements and payments. And we're able to see here that we have nothing associated as an invoice and the statements and payments tab. So before we had an invoice that was associated with the enforcement, we were able to see anything that could be paid there. We could click on that information, check all of that out. We don't have that associated with this. So our total selected payments is 0. We have nothing associated and we're not able to select any payments to make on this as we don't have anything associated with this enforcement. Any questions on anything with that information? Pretty straightforward there.
Yep, there's no questions in the chat at this time.
I will turn it back over to you then, Gina, after this demo portion. So you can finish this off.
All right. Okay, can everybody still see my screen?
If it's still small for people too, they can click pin and it will pin it to their screen a little larger.
Yeah, I'm wondering, it's saying that it's still sharing it, but I don't know if it's the full screen size for you guys. So I'm gonna keep moving, but let me know if you can't see the screen at full size. All right, so thank you for that demo, Megan. Lots of exciting stuff coming, new functionality as we continue to just add more and more for all of your interactions in the portal for you for your convenience. So let's talk about what's coming soon though. So this functionality is rolling out next week. But we do have more things we are already planning for a fast follow in September sometime. We will let you know exactly when that time frame is. But these are some additional enhancements that are going to be coming as well. So POBMs will have the ability to view and request a hearing or an ISC on behalf of their agents. They won't be able to do that in this release, but in the next release, that will be functionality that is going to be added. Also, like we mentioned with that statements and payments tab, invoice records will be created for applications as well that require any kind of payment. So with this release, you're going to be able to see anything that's associated with an enforcement, but coming soon after, that will be more inclusive to add in applications and any payments that are associated with that as well. Hearing status field will be added to the enforcement detail page. So the page that Megan just reviewed with you, there's going to be a hearing status field that's going to be added. So that way you can, when you log in and you look at that page, you'll know the exact status of a hearing, whether it's pending, scheduled, whatever that status is, you can log right in and see it. And then enhancements are also coming to that page for making it more mobile friendly. So a lot of everything in your portal right now is mobile friendly. This page needs a few more tweaks for it to be mobile friendly, and that will be coming in September as well. So really exciting stuff. We're continuing to make sure we get these items rolled out to you as quickly as possible starting next week, but then fast follow with these other enhancements, and then always looking for other functionality that might make your lives a little bit easier. Let's talk about next steps and resources. And I don't think I said this at the beginning of the training, but we did not intend on keeping you the full 2 hours today. So that's good news. We always want to schedule a little bit of extra time just to answer any questions and make sure we have enough time to get through everything. But we're at the tail end of this, so we should be wrapped here pretty shortly and you can get back to your day. So next steps and resources, this is should look familiar as with past releases. We are going to be adding all of your training materials, updates to your handbooks, things like that to the MLMS training page. So what you will find there, the updated POBM handbook, the updated LA, FA, DA handbooks, all of the agent handbooks, basically. There's also going to be a recorded enforcement instructional video. So a very condensed version of what we covered today. There'll be some, a very quick video for you to reference. If you don't want to come back and look at this long training or look through your handbooks, you will have a quick reference to this short video snippet that you can look at for some guidance and support. And then we will also be sending a copy of this recorded training to you so that you do have it if you want to reference some things that were mentioned today. Of course, as always, reach out with any questions before, after, during the go live. It is scheduled for next Tuesday, August 17th. Now, a little bit more about where these resources can be found. If you are not familiar, on the marijuana web pages, there is a training resource MLMS page. You can see right there at the number 1 on the left-hand side. If you're on any marijuana page, you will see a quick link to the training resources. You click on that link and then you will be brought to what you're seeing for number 2. There's a drop down under marijuana facilities and agents. That is where all of your training resources live. That's where we update your handbooks. The links stay the same. We just replace them with the latest and greatest and newest information for you. Any new video snippets, anything that we add will be shared there as well. So it's your one-stop shop for all of your training materials that you might need. And go live and training resources. So as mentioned on the previous slide, but a little bit more detail here. This is where you can find any additional information regarding what's happening in the marijuana programs. So the marijuana web pages, those continue to be updated with anything that's happening around social equity, FAQs, your training materials, things like that. The POBM handbook, the agent handbooks, the video I just mentioned, FAQs. We will be sending another communication out next week to let you know that these materials are available to you once we get them posted, and also linking to them. So it will be a reminder to you to go out and check them. And then of course, content is continuously updated over time. You also have us and the leadership team at ADHS for your support as always. And with that, I am going to open it up for any remaining questions that you guys might have. Feel free to take yourself off mute, pop a question in the chat, whatever you prefer.
Do you anticipate that fines are going to come on the heels of an inspection? Do you anticipate, when I look at the criteria, like the number of persons affected by the violations, should we expect fines related to test result issues or some of these other issues? I just want to kind of understand to be able to give a lens to the team about enforcement fines. We've never experienced something like that before. We just had an inspection at our cultivation facility with 0 deficiencies. That was, normal and exciting for us at that particular facility. So when I hear something like this, my heart goes do-do-do-do-do. So I just want to understand like how to give the team some predictability around just like general ideas. I see the criteria obviously within the statute, but I just want to understand a little more.
Sarah, this is Megan. And so this is just putting our existing processes in the system. So while you haven't had those fines, other people have already.
Okay.
We have an existing enforcement schedule that we use for repeat violations and things like that. So it's normally based on repeat violations, and depending on what the violations are, how severe they are, you may have a provider meeting, which could result in an agreement to pay some fines, or it could result in a notice of intent to revoke or something like that, that then could also result in a settlement agreement that could result in some fines and things like that. But this is us having the enforcement module in the system is not creating a new thing.
Okay.
With the program. So I
was like, oh my God. Okay.
Yeah,
Got it. I understand.
We're not like up in our name or anything. This is just
Okay.
having it in the system instead of through paperwork like we currently do.
I appreciate being able to ask the question because my perception all the time, even though is like, are we up in the ante here? Like, what is this? But I think I understand this is just the formalization of an existing process so that we can track it inside of our verification system. I get it. Okay.
Yes. And so far, those fines, anytime they've come up, people have had to pay them through check, just like, you guys used to have to pay all your renewal fees and all of that via check. By having it in the system, now we have other payment options where people can use credit cards and things like that. So
okay. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And Sarah, I think it's a great question, and also something that we can also reinforce when we send out another communication next week with the training materials or any other place that we're communicating. So other folks don't have that same thought. It is really good to just clarify, we are just putting this in the system. Nothing is changing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I think that means that everybody feels pretty solid on what's coming, what to expect. But of course, if you think of a question afterwards, you are always encouraged to reach out and ask. Megan, is there anything else that you want to add to close us out today?
Nope, we just want to thank everyone for their time. And again, hopefully this is functionality that most of you will never have to use or only have to use sparingly, but it will be there, and just make sure we have better tracking in the future.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Appreciate your time.